Chapter 6 Bounty of Bounties. Now they were bound for the Grimstone. Zale had declared it so. His officers' collective silence upon hearing this decision had spoken volumes. No one argued. Perhaps they were too exhausted anyway. And no one voiced support. Only Rosh spoke, asking one simple question. Why? Tonight's Darkfire event solidified for me just how real these powers are, Zale told them. He made brief eye contact with Fulgur. And I've just learned there might be an advantage to getting it that we can exploit. Further details could be discussed later. In truth, Zale was still processing his discussion with Fulgur. Zale knew one thing for certain. If his family could be tied to the Grimstone, now being sought by powerful, dangerous people, then he intended to get his hands on it before Seadred or anyone else. Then he could control the outcome. Zale could barely keep his eyes open when he heard the knock on his cabin door. He'd been at his desk and was about to climb into his hammock for much-needed slumber. It was almost the first hour of morning when Yancey and Dippy entered with two others. One was Yancey's new quartermaster's mate, Kelvin, a short man with beady eyes and an expressionless face. Seeing the other person nearly knocked Zale from his chair in shock. It was his daughter. "Starlina!" Zale gasped, standing. "What in ghoul's blazes are you doing here?" Dippy urged her to a chair, looking thoroughly vexed. "Sir," Yancey said, "we found her crouched under the spare sailcloth. Gave the men a real fright." Starlina scowled, her arms crossed, and she refused to make eye contact with anyone. She was a vault, Zale knew. If she would talk at all, it wouldn't be in front of these men. "Thank you, gents," Zale said. "She'll be fine here. You two get some rest." The men left without another word. Zale remained quiet for many long moments. If a Grimkin had rowed up to their boat, that would have fit right in with the weirdness from last night. If a Terran had fallen from the sky, that they could deal with. If Wigglebelly had fallen overboard from fainting, standard procedure. But this flummoxed him completely. "Starlina, why are you here? You don't even like sailing." Her oval face appeared even longer than usual. Her hair was frazzled and her eyes appeared dark and puffy. "I didn't mean to be here," she replied. "I despise my being here as much as you do." "I don't despise. I'm happy to see you, Starlina. But it's not safe for you to be here. We're on a dangerous mission." "Sweet Elo above, I'm just glad you're okay. You must have seen what we dealt with tonight." "The purple flames? I only saw that from a distance before Jensen threw that giant sail over me." "Jensen." Starlina looked at him directly for the first time since arriving. Zale could tell she hadn't meant to say that, but there was no denying that she had. "We were seeing each other before the voyage," she said, "and he wanted to show me the ship. It was just after I got here that those ghostly-looking fires appeared." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "What was that?" "It's called Darkfire. We don't know how it started, or perhaps by whom, but it has injected a certain urgency into our quest." "Darkfire," she repeated. "It was so cold." Zale nodded sympathetically. "You shouldn't be here, darling. Perhaps it's safest if we let you off at Vartu along the way." She frowned. "I thought you were bound for Vartu and then heading back home." "Well, that was the intent," he mused. "There's been a change of plan. Now we're sailing well past Grantrilia. I'm sure you don't want to stick around for that. It's not safe. If you can find passage home from Vartu, then great. If not, then keep near the harbor. We'll swing back through during our return." "How long will that take?" "Hard to say," Zale answered. About a month, depending on how smoothly things go.
A month?
Better give us 6 or 7 weeks to be sure. Things might get sketchy. If I didn't feel like he'd somehow get you in worse trouble, I'd be tempted to leave Jensen with you at port.
Where is he now?
She asked quietly. In sickbay, after being banged unconscious by an oar. Maybe he'll wake up with a fully active brain for once, so I can beat it back out of him.
Please don't be too hard on him, Starlina said. You know he thinks the world of you.
So did my cat. But she had twice the backbone and thrice the instinct of that lackwit. For the life of me, I don't know what you see in him. He paced his cabin aimlessly, fatigue getting the better of him. It's late. We'll deal with this tomorrow. You can use my hammock. I've slept many a time in these chairs anyway. Her eyes were downcast, pain in her expression.
I'm sorry to trouble your mission.
Well, at least you finally get to experience life at sea with the greatest crew there is. Starlina pulled herself into Zale's hammock, already looking seasick. Zale breathed in the salty morning air as he looked out upon the open waters. This was the best part about sailing. Beyond the horizon in every direction were lands and treasures aplenty, known and undiscovered, settled and untouched, plundered and plundered to be. Amongst the salt in the air, he detected a hint of sour. It had started even before his morning coffee arrived. Casper had entered his cabin looking sleepy-eyed and hot under the collar, a wad of folded maps tucked in his arms. He slapped the navigational pages upon Zale's desk, curtly reviewing their new course. Their course had been altered from almost due north to a few points northeast, where they would curve around beyond the shoals of Karangar and break due north for the southern coast of Gukhan. If the winds favored them, they would land in about 2.5 weeks. This was before factoring in their diversion to Vartu to drop off Starlina. It was a simple correction requiring little review, although to do so was protocol, one that Casper performed so mechanically that his view on this impromptu, unilateral change was obvious. Casper wasn't the only one. As soon as Zale stepped onto the deck, he heard Fump grumbling about how they'd provisioned for a voyage half as long, and now they'd have to be more careful with rations. Dippy called out, "Captain on deck!" with such haste that the deckhands barely heard him. Starlina, who had left the cabin even before Zale awoke, still wasn't looking at him. Any of the men he encountered on deck gave no more than perfunctory nods and brusque greetings. He was content to let them stew over a decision they didn't like, so long as their work got done. Any act of insolence, however, would be dealt a swift blow. That reminded him of a certain sailor whose name had come up the night before, the one responsible for bringing his daughter aboard the ship. Zale found him with crewmates Tate and Miles near the starboard rail on the main deck. Zale approached from behind. "Good morning, Jensen." The young man jumped, caught completely unawares, even though Tate and Miles had looked straight in Zale's direction. "I see you're awake now," Zale said. "At least in the sense that your eyes are open." Jensen's hands fluttered about his pockets like a schoolboy caught with another student's homework. "Curious case," Zale thought, scowling. Good morning, sir," Jensen replied. "I trust you've familiarized yourself with our new bearings in preparation for the night watch." "Yes, of course. I'll be going over that with Casper in advance of my charge. I'll keep us straight and steady, sir. You can count on that." Zale growled under his breath. "No doubt you will, sailor, or you'll be rowing your way back home after we bring my daughter to safety in Vartu. Even in ideal conditions, your ill-conceived little stunt will cost us 3 days of detour, if not 5. I hope you're fonder of coffee than sleep, because that's about all you'll be getting." Jensen's young face paled as Zale turned away. Jensen had a feeling he would find Starlina upon the afterdeck. "So, you enjoy the view after all," he said.
"Don't speak to me, Jensen."
He came up beside her and placed his elbows upon the railing.
You know I didn't mean for this to happen, right?
She kept her eyes toward the ocean. Knowing her, Jensen figured she was looking not at the water, but rather for any sign of land.
I should have known better than to set foot on this boat. Nothing good could come from it.
Jensen bit at his lip, remembering his prior intentions.
It felt like so much longer ago than last night. Looking at the bright side, now you can finally experience the majesty of the open seas. You get to see your father's crew in action. I didn't want to sail the seas, Jensen. What am I going to tell my boss? Amira will be off to university by the time I get back. I won't even get to tell her goodbye.
Her tears sparkled in the sunlight. Jensen sighed and inwardly cursed his recklessness. This was indeed an unmitigated disaster.
I'm so sorry, Starlina. I know it's not what you intended, she said. No one could have foreseen that awful fire. How do you suppose that happened? I think the biggest question is who made that happen. Whatever it was, word around the ship is that it's responsible for the captain changing our course. Such a dangerous, unpredictable profession this is.
Jensen almost laughed out. He felt awful that Starlina had ended up on the ship, but there was also a glimmer of excitement. Never would there be a better chance for her to see for herself what it was like to sail.
That's part of the excitement. Although I must say, usually we have some idea of what it is we're actually bound for and the amount of the expected payout.
Finally, she looked at him, her face softer, more relaxed.
How's your head? Much better, thanks. The headache comes and goes. Healer Fulgur says it should feel much better by tonight. Although my impending lack of sleep might not help the recovery.
She ran a hand through his hair, caressing him gently. He closed his eyes at the touch, both soothing and exhilarating. Jensen suddenly wished she could be here with him on every voyage. She actually smiled, showing her perfect teeth.
My father doesn't deserve so much loyalty from you, she said. Oh, you've got a knot on your head.
He winced.
Ah, yes. It's still rather tender.
He took her hand from his head and held it, relishing her skin's warm softness.
Well, I'd better find Beep and get ready for a long night keeping the ship on course.
With another quick smile, he turned toward the stairs.
You're right, you know, Starlina said.
Jensen turned.
It is beautiful. The ocean, I mean.
He came back to her, drawing even closer than before.
Before now, I believed it to be the most beautiful thing I would ever see from this ship.
He inched closer, his heart beating faster as he neared her tanned face. There was no other person he'd rather see, no better time than now.
A sailor takes action, he reminded himself.
He kissed her. At their lips' touch, they drew breath, and his nostrils filled with an intoxicating blend of the salty air and the rose water in which she'd last bathed. He pulled away.
That was before today. I'll see you later, Starlina.
The midday Jovador sun beat down upon the ship, making the upper deck like a stovetop. 3 days after leaving Warvonia, the Queenie breezed along through a mild chop in the water and full wind in the sail. Pleasant gusts of air pushed into the inner berthing deck, providing the comfort of the wind without the scorch of the sun. Jensen sat with Starlina and several of his crewmates amongst the rowing benches, slurping Wigglebelly's latest batch of bean soup. Soon Wigglebelly joined with his own bowl, followed by Yancey and Rosh. They were gathered around the ever-intriguing Fulgur Geth as he regaled them with tales of antiquity. And so it was that Zophiel became the second Arcastral to enter our world to save it from cataclysmic doom. It is said that the brilliance of her atmospheric entry circled the entire world with golden flashes of light. Soon the deathly cold temperatures of the prior age started to rise, and our ancestors emerged from their caves to an unencumbered sun.
all the ice and snow which had blanketed the land for nearly a millennium began to recede. There were those who emerged who had never before seen anything in the sky except for the clouds of snowstorms. The so-called lightning cataclysm, which brought about the Foudroyant Age, Zophil's age, was in fact not a cataclysm but rather an ethereal healing of the land. Men and women, Grimkins and Anthropods, all beings of Grantrillia, begged to worship Zophil as a goddess. She wouldn't have it. Even as the fullness of her ethereal energy fed into the healing of this planet, even as immortality seeped from her body, she gave all the glory to Elo. As a manifestation of her energy, an ethereal material was created.
Fulgur pulled the long dagger from the sheath at his side. There was no white glow around it, as there had been during their fight with the Darkfire. The blade was solid black, like polished obsidian, with pinpoints of light that sparkled like stars. Jensen imagined it was what the night sky might look like if there were no rings and moon.
Novidian, Fulgur said. In these days, any known traces of it are carefully guarded by the Order of Ether Diamond.
Their eyes followed the blade as he moved it slowly through the air, as if hypnotized.
"How's your knife black, man?" Wigglebelly asked. "Did you paint it that way?"
"It's not paint, Wiggles," Yancey said. "It's the mineral. How else would you explain the sparkles?" Wigglebelly shrugged.
"That's easy. Tiny diamonds in the paint, man."
He popped a large spoonful of beans into his mouth.
"Many weapons are forged with the intent to take life, or to overcome others," said Fulgur. "A weapon such as this is forged with the intent of saving life. The purpose with which one forms an ethereal material is highly significant."
"May I?" asked Rosh, holding out his hand. Fulgur nodded. He handed the dagger to Rosh gently, not out of fragility, it seemed to Jensen, but rather more like reverence. Rosh hefted the blade. "It seems light even for its small size. Very durable, too, as far as I can tell." He gave the blade back to Fulgur. "How's this compared to steel or iron?" Fulgur's eyes twinkled. It was a question he seemed eager to answer.
"Nothing you have aboard this ship could stand against it."
Jensen had never met a physiker or chaplain like this. True, his devotion to Eloism seemed absolute, but this weapon, Novidian, was utterly unique. He wondered what the captain knew of this, and if that had anything to do with the pursuit of the Grimstone. "There was white light coming from it before," said Yancey.
"I've never seen any steel dagger do that."
Fulgur lifted the dagger, and the white glow appeared faintly all around it.
"Ethereal materials grant their users certain powers, to widely varying degrees. Novidian is like a connection to the energies of Zophil herself, to the divine life she poured into our world throughout the Foudroyant Age."
"So," laughed Tate, "it's like you're wielding angel's light." Fulgur tilted his head with an ironic smirk.
"It is precisely like that."
Tate's mirth faded into something like awe-inspired terror. Jensen and Tate shared a glance, and he wondered if they were thinking the same thing.
Is this weapon in the hand of Fulgur an asset or a threat?
Starlina's gaze was fixed on the glowing weapon. "Will it shine for anyone else or just you?"
"That depends," Fulgur answered gently. "For some, yes. For others, perhaps it could, with time."
He held it out to her. "Please,
see how it feels to you."
She reached out and took it by the grip. "Hey, it's still glowing," Rosh exclaimed, pointing.
"So it is," Fulgur replied. "How does it feel?"
"It's like something fond, like something familiar," Starlina said. Jensen leaned toward her, his face alight. "Does it feel warm? Does it pulse or vibrate?"
"No, it's not like that," she replied. "It's more like holding something very dear to me, something so familiar that it's almost a part of me.
She looked at Fulgur.
For something that indicates power, it seems remarkably welcoming.
Fulgur took it back from her.
There are some within the Order who say those with a strong connection to ethereal materials will achieve great purpose in life. This Order you speak of, Jensen said. What is it? Where is it based?
We are sworn guardians of the light and of the ethereals, such as Novidian, Fulgur answered. Those of the devotion are scattered and our armories divided. No one member knows the location of every stronghold. Yet, if in need, we know how to call one another, to find one another, and gather. Wigglebelly jittered with anticipation.
Hey, do you use that dagger to shave your head? That's like an angel rubbing you bald, man.
I once had a full head of hair, actually. Black, with hints of white and blue. Yancey nodded with interest. 3 colors. Nice. Tate jabbed at Jensen with a bony elbow.
Hey, your little lady's got a nice head of hair. Wished I'd have known we could bring along our own scrubbers on this trip.
Now we have to detour to Korengar, grumbled Kelvin in his monotone voice. Korengar's where we're supposed to be headed in the first place, said Rosh. I'm more concerned about this whole Grimstone search.
Personally, I hope we find some pixies and munchkins along the way,
Yancey said with a chortle. Do you question the captain's judgment in this matter? Fulgur asked. The other men exchanged glances, hesitating. Starlina's eyes were fixed on Fulgur.
Screw it, Tate said. It seems an awful rushed decision to me. Why do you have to change his mind? If this was such a sure thing, we'd have left port knowing that was our bounty. That's what I think.
I've never doubted the captain before, Jensen said, but this is very unlike him. We could take the short runs we planned and still beat Sea Dread. Rosh patted the empty sleeve on his left side, where normally there would be a second arm. Sometimes one strong thing is better than 2 weaker ones. Yancey chuckled.
He's talking about arms and voyages at the same time. Love it!
Heavy steps crept toward them from the stairs.
Well, men, enjoying some glutton chatter, are we?
It was the unmistakable voice of Captain Murdoch.
It's some fine sustenance, Wigglebelly. Some of the best brewer beans I can remember. Brewer beans! Sounds like bean beer, man!
Chuckled Wigglebelly. Shifty glances were aplenty. Jensen wondered how much of their conversation the captain had heard.
Fine work victualling the crew on our modified rations, the captain said. Gentlemen, such a nice day to keep yourselves below deck. Yes, sir, Tate piped, his voice unusually high. As always, you couldn't be more right. I wholeheartedly agree, said Yancey. I think we're all about to get back to work, sir. At ease, men, Murdoch said. I've been considering things, and I believe I know just what our crew needs for a time like this.
Jensen grimaced and wondered if there was about to be punishment for too much lollygagging, or, even worse, openly questioning the captain. He suddenly imagined being strung from the stern with his crewmates, dangling like lanterns.
What's that? Rosh asked. It's time to clear the upper deck and bring out the extra ale.
Yancey rubbed his auburn beard.
A deck party, Captain? Aye, Fump. A deck party.
Deckhands hauled barrels and flagons and all the ship's most perishable foods to the main deck. Starlina watched them from beside the larboard railing, curious about this deck party that was about to take place. With any luck, she might even manage to enjoy herself. The smooth head of Fulgur emerged from the tangle of crew members. He was walking in her direction, frock coat billowing and arms folded.
Ah, Miss Starlina, Fulgur said.
She returned a cordial smile.
I'm not sure what's about to happen here will be chaplain appropriate. Probably all the more reason I should be on hand, he said. How are you doing? Trying to make the best of bad, I suppose. Perhaps some drink will help. She flinched, remembering this was the chaplain. And praying, of course. Is it wrong to drink and pray at once? Fulgur unfolded his arms, grinning. Anyone with a drink probably has great reason to pray. Ah, of course. She felt his eyes on her for a moment. I merely joke, Starlina. Please, no need to prohibit yourself on my account. In fact, I pray you will enjoy the evening. She relaxed against the rail. Fulgur really was rather charming. And I you. Starlina, he leaned a bit closer. Earlier, when you held the dagger, the Novidian connected with you. That is why the glow remained in your grasp. You are indeed someone very special. I suppose next you're going to tell me that I'm here for a reason, to achieve some higher purpose. He laughed. Reason and purpose are Elo's business, and whether they align with mine or anyone else's here is not for me to say. Indeed, I don't wish to be made any part of whatever is going on here. She was anxious to reach Vartu, where she would still need to find the fastest way back to Warvonia. I will speak of it to no one without your consent, Fulgur said. But Starlina, I request a pact between us. Should I ever need your help in some way, please come forth with confidence. Shall there be a signal between us? This was startling. Starlina wondered what this man could ever possibly need her help with. It seemed of little matter anyway. Soon she would be back on land. Okay, she said. It shall be, I think. Yes, of course. It shall be a star. If ever from me you see a star, then please come at once, for there is a great need. And, should that time come, you just might find yourself with strength you never before would have imagined. A star, she said. My favorite shape. Then it's perfect. He folded his arms with a wink. I should see if any of the men need assistance, with anything other than drink, of course. Thank you, Starlina. She watched him walk away. She decidedly had no part to play here, yet, as Fulgur mixed in with the crew, she couldn't help but feel a part of something bigger than before. Twilight glowed in the sky. Flamethyst torches lined the ship, and the rich, reedy sounds of accordion chords filled the air. Wigglebelly's thick fingers proved not only adept in the kitchen, but also on the keys of the accordion. Jensen couldn't help but slap his thigh to the jovial tune. Captain Murdoch stood upon the quarterdeck, overlooking the entire crew gathered below. He raised a tankard of ale overhead. All right, you scurvy growlmongers. Cheer up your guzzle pipes and strike up a tone pleasing to me ear. Wigglebelly played all the more fervently, swaying his girth to the tune as Fump, Chimp, Dippy, and Beep clanged their tankards and erupted into song. Most of the crew joined in at the end of each verse, frothy drink splashing from their upraised mugs.
We're kings of the seas, yeah, we bring the loot. To all other sea dogs we give the loot. Our captain's name is Sail the Gale. Hey-ho, lift up your ale. Queen is our ship, she's the greatest cat. In a crew we've got tall, thin, short, and fat. When a job's on the line, we will never fail. Hey-ho, so let's set sail!
The captain's roaring laughter could have awoken the dead of the depths. Murdoch himself took up the next verse.
In all the guild, our crew is boss. Fump, Chim Chum, and Wigglebelly Sauce. Dippy and Beep, and all the rest. Hey ho! Zale's crew is the best!
Starlina groaned loudly by Jensen's side.
Well, that settles it. My father is officially a madman.
He's a riot! Jensen yelled over the ruckus. Murdoch held both arms high in the air, demanding the attention of all. Gents and ladies! He motioned his drink in the general direction of Yvette and Starlina. Already we've been tested to our wits' end. Many of you doubt my decision to change our course.
Murdoch
held a hand forward, calming the masses. I know of the chatter. Very little is said on old Pop-Pop's ship, which he doesn't hear. But I tell you this, and hear me well. With the Grimstone in our grasp, the cargo will be simple, but the reward will be many times over the bounty we set out for. The bounty of bounties.
To the gale!
Roared Rolf Hookney Cone, a brown-skinned, barrel-chested deckhand.
To the gale!
To the gale!
Shouted the crew.
Never doubted you for a second, Captain.
Tate shouted. Wigglebelly set his fingers again to the accordion, prompting a flurry of dancing, stomping, and shouting. A few men urged the jolly seamen along.
Faster! Play faster! Wiggle that jiggle bow!
Red-faced, Wigglebelly put his all into it, chuckling nearly in time with his music. Even Yvette joined in the dance, hooking arms with the rowers who'd joined the crew with her. Jensen looked around in wonderment. Here was this crew on a daring mission, going after some mythical object they weren't even sure existed, for a payoff they could scarcely imagine. And yet the entire ship was a festive uproar. Only one more thing could make this night complete. He turned to Starlina and proffered an arm. She arched an eyebrow.
Come now, Starlina. We're here, under the stars and rings, and there's no more jolly a place on the entire ocean than this very ship. We can share at least one dance, can't we?
After an eye roll, she took his arm. Fine. One dance. They started off easy, but that one dance seemed to shake the inhibitions from Starlina. A second dance followed, then a third, each more energetic than the last. Others of the crew gaped at them longingly, perhaps the first time there had ever been such jealousy of Jensen's position. Their options for female accompaniment at sea were extremely few. Usually, zero. And Yvette was not to be trifled with. Eventually, the music died down. Wigglebelly barely able to breathe from being so winded, and Captain Murdoch strode throughout the deck. Yvette, Murdoch called. I hear you've kept the men on edge and ready for action. That's well and good. This fair wind might not hold out much longer. I haven't seen a lady take such control of a group of men since the nuns of my boarding school days. Rancorous old shrews, the lot of them. But if I hadn't had all their discipline, I might have ended up doing an honest man's work. His infectious laughter drew everyone around him. Shrew! Shouted Yancey, snapping his fingers. That should be Yvette's nickname. I'm down, Murdoch replied, provided Miss Caskmore accepts, that is. Yvette clanked mugs with Yancey. With honor. Jensen. Murdoch turned his way. Some nice dancing with my daughter out here. A fine display for this lot to sink their chops into, don't you think? Parade her around much longer and I might have to get worried. Jensen felt suddenly wary of those around him.
She's a terrific dancer, sir. Always has been. But, point taken, sir. I'll be mindful of the crew.
Oh, stop being such an animal, Starlina snapped. Murdoch gave Jensen a hard nudge and leaned towards Starlina. Relax, my dear. I'm merely joshing with the boy.
He turned to Jensen. We can't expect her to be used to the way we jab at each other, can we? Ah, right, Captain, Jensen replied. Perhaps it was the ale, but Murdoch seemed a bit chummier than Jensen was accustomed to. Say, Jensen, I was thinking, Murdoch said. How about we give you a little break from nighttime helms duty, just for a couple of nights? Jensen blinked in surprise. Thank you, sir. Whatever pleases you, of course. Right, Murdoch said.
Beep! Over here!
Casper joined them. Let's get Jensen here off the helm the next 2 nights. I'm also thinking, keep the crow's nest clear. Casper frowned.
Sir, we need to keep a weathered eye for Vaatu.
Murdoch waved him off. Once Fump starts chasing butterflies on deck, you'll know we're close to land. Right. No one in the crow's nest. Just hang Jensen here from it upside down so I can hear him scream like a scalded-ass monkey. Jensen was stunned, his eyes wide with concern. Casper flashed a glare at Jensen and walked off, leaving Murdoch to his mirthful chuckles. The captain gave Jensen another nudge. No hard feelings, Jensen. Might as well get used to a bit of subterfuge. Starlina shook her head hopelessly. Murdoch took off toward his cabin, clapping backs and bellowing wisecracks all the way.